What's up, YouTubers? This is me, Johnny. I want to make a short video on the perpetual tourist concept. I think by now a lot of my viewers probably know what the perpetual tourist idea is. Basically, in a nutshell, without getting too complicated, it's having a residency in one country, having a bank account in another different country, having investments in maybe yet another country, and possibly having a second or third passport in yet another country. The idea is not to the idea is not to live in a country too long so you become legally taxable like in most countries. If you live more than 6 months, you become a resident of that country and you become taxable. Now in the past, things like that didn't matter because governments weren't really as desperate for money, but as governments run out of money, like California is a good example, you become taxable after you live there 6 months. California is another example where, if you try to leave, in many cases they'll try to tax you even after you leave. For example, during the pandemic, a few people I know have left California, or actually, yeah, I think during it. And then in the following year, California is sending them income tax requests, even though they don't have any earned income from there. And all the requests to have California stop sending them dunning letters saying they owe them money has fallen on deaf ears. Partly that's probably because there's no one in the office taking letters or taking phone calls and or letters or answering emails. But basically that's one of the problems that a lot of people are running into. Like, even if you move, they still try to collect tax from you, even if they know you've moved, just because they're that desperate for revenue. It's kind of like when a good example was back in the day, Hide My Ass as a VPN service provider. I closed my account at VPN a long time ago, but they still billed me. And then I requested them to stop billing me, and they kept billing me. And it was a real pain in the neck getting to refund me back, and it was a real pain in the neck to get them to stop billing me. And the same thing has happened to other people. For example, you stop, like on your bank, you have your bill set up so your bank pays your bills, then you stop like using the service, and the service keeps billing your bank account even though you don't get the service and you stop the service. Corporations oftentimes do that. They don't say this publicly, but they do that intentionally just to get a little extra revenue, because they know not everyone's going to look at their bank statement. They also know not everyone's going to charge back, and they also know the hassle of going through all the process of getting this reversed and stopped is so much. Most people let it go for years, so they collect revenue for years, even though people have stopped using their service or they requested the company to stop billing them. Anyways, that's what governments are doing nowadays to collect revenue from taxpayers who leave one tax jurisdiction to move into another. Well, now the perpetual tourist concept, that's kind of briefly how it works. One thing I want to add is, while you don't live in one place, the same place all year round, you have like your playgrounds. Like, for example, if you like the nightlife, you might spend 2 or 3 months in Thailand. Then if you like hiking, you might spend a month or two in Southern Europe. Or if you like hiking, you might spend a couple months in Canada or the United States, but just not long enough to become a tax resident. And then if you have like a brick and mortars business, you might spend a few months managing it when you're in town. But usually you just hire a manager for that. And the other thing is, even though it can be complicated if you have a lot of wealth, even if you don't have a lot of wealth, this system can be implemented and used to your advantage. And it might need to be, with what I see coming in the future as far as governments going broke and introducing wealth taxes and possibly precluding you from leaving the country, or easily leaving the country and taking your wealth with you. They could try to make Bitcoin illegal. They could try to do like South Africa, make it very expensive and very difficult to take your wealth out of the country. They can do like Lebanon, where recently they seized all dollar accounts and converted them into local currency, and then inflated the heck out of those accounts. And while they did all that, you couldn't take all your money out to convert back into dollars or euros if you even if you wanted to, even if the money was available. So the reason I'm talking about it is because in the past it was kind of popular, because back in the good old days, you could bank in Switzerland or Austria and have not perfect bank secrecy, but pretty good bank secrecy. And for the most part, unless you're an American, the Swiss didn't really cooperate with your local governments. Even then, if the Swiss did cooperate, the U.S. government had to prove you did something illegal according to U.S. law before they cooperate with you. Now, over the years, that's all changed. Now banks pretty much cave into all government demands, whether it's the United States or the United Kingdom. Just recently today, I was reading about how China is now sanctioning U.S. citizens. By that I mean, like, you can't travel into certain Chinese country or like China, but also you can't travel into Hong Kong. They're also not letting Chinese businesses, if your name gets on that list, they're not letting Chinese businesses open accounts for you, do business with you. Well, the United States has done that in the reverse for all kinds of reasons, for all kinds of people around the world. So if you happen to have like a Muslim sounding last name and you're on the no-fly list, you could have been precluded from flying out of the States. You could have been precluded from opening bank accounts. You could have had your assets seized mistakenly, thinking you were the other person. All these things are possibilities and have happened. And there's horror stories like that quite a bit. And now China's entering the fray, and now they're going to start doing that. Also, too, this strategy really worked well in the past, but that was when tax havens didn't have as much pressure on them like they do now to cooperate with foreign governments, and when they used to have a little bit of bank secrecy. Now, a lot of that's gone. It's not completely gone, but a lot of it's gone. Sometimes if you can get a second passport from a third or a developing world country, a third world country, and if you can get somewhere to open a bank account for you, you can somewhat get your privacy back. But usually in that passport, it'll say you were born in the U.S. if you're an American citizen. And typically in most European countries, they still won't open up the account because they'll just say you have the second passport. But in some cases, it'll be easier to open an account, but they still won't give you bank privacy because they'll still say you're a citizen of the U.S. In many cases, they'll ask for your renunciation certificate, and that's if they'll even entertain the idea of opening the account. But even then, even if you can get through all those hurdles, the cost of banking in places like Austria and Switzerland is so high now, it's probably not worth it for middle-class people. Maybe for very, very wealthy people, but even then, I'm not sure it's really worth it. But of course, in all these things, you need to talk to a lawyer and accountant to figure out if these things are even worthwhile and if they're even effective anymore. The reason I bring it up is because you can have a simple version of that, like you can have an LLC if you're a U.S. citizen and have it taxed at a very low rate, if at all. And depending on how you set it all up, the bank account's not in your name anyways. The bank account is going to use an EIN that your lawyer gets. And I'm not suggesting that any of this is all tax-free. I'm not suggesting it can just be lower taxed. And you can deduct a lot of your business expenses. And I'm also suggesting it too because you're having the company you open up, or the bank account's not in your name, and the corporation itself has its own credit rating and credit history. So if you ever have credit problems and you can't bank anymore in your Christian name, you can always just bank in the name of the company. And you have a credit history that goes with that. Assuming your credit's still stellar, you can use it to purchase and do business in your corporate credit name and also in your corporate bank accounts if you ever have a legal problem in the U.S. You can also do these things in Canada and the United Kingdom. I'm just suggesting that as one option where if you can't bank offshore, you can do that. Another option too is you can bank in still large parts of Latin America and get an SA corporation and have pretty good privacy. But if your name is on the bank account, then that's not going to happen. But again, you have to consult an attorney and an accountant to get an idea of what's good for you. And the fees for doing that aren't as high as say, opening up offshore accounts in all the kind of blue chip countries and tax havens that most offshore providers will suggest for you, the fees for that are quite expensive. And for most middle class people, it's not going to be worth it unless your business earns enough money to cover all those fees and make it worthwhile. In general, for most people, it's not going to be worth it. The days of opening a shell company and running a shell company, they're not completely over, but they're mostly over. It just depends what nation you're talking about, what you're using the account for. And as an American, if you set up an LLC or something like that and live in another country, it's going to be more effectively useful to you than if you actually still live in the U.S. The reason I'm bringing all this up is because it's getting harder and harder and more difficult to evade all these new rules and regulations as a U.S. citizen. And it may get to the point where you're going to have to leave the country and become a bit of a perpetual tourist, in that you may have to live in one or two different countries and kind of travel around like a nomad. Like, some of my viewers might be familiar with nomad capitalists. Like, I don't like the word nomad, but you might actually have to have a residency in country A, travel around when you're even in that country to another country, just to keep up your liberty and freedoms. Just travel around and open up other bank accounts if and when you can and are allowed to. But at the same time, you have your residence in country B, you'll get issued your local ID for that country. And depending on what country you're in, like in Central America, if you're in the C4 countries, you can travel in the C4 countries with that local ID without a passport. That's really important because they're going to make it harder and harder to travel even with a passport. The same thing can be done in the Mercosur countries in South America. In that case, you would set up a residency in Paraguay if you just want to deposit some money, and you can get the FBI background check if you're an American, and you can comply on all the other, things you'll need, like a health certificate and all that. Once you get your local ID, you can go to Brazil on that ID. Possibly, I say possibly, you could open an account in Brazil with that local ID. Maybe not completely. Sometimes you can do these things by yourself. Most of the time you can't. A lot of times, if you're going to use your local ID to open up an account in another country, it's going to be very difficult. And the only kind of workaways that can be around that, workarounds, is to have a lawyer certify your ID and be kind of he introduces you to another bank that will open up an account with that ID. A lot of banks won't let you do that. They'll want to see the passport of whatever original country you're from. But again, it depends. In Latin America, these things can be more easily done. But because it's such a pain in the neck, sometimes it's just better to either use an SA corporation as your banking option and or to use another person as a nominee for an account, especially if you're just running a couple $1,000s a month through it, say your living expenses. Again, I want to stress the reason I mention this because I'm seeing where we're getting to the point where more and more countries are going to introduce wealth taxes. You quite literally will have to keep some of your wealth in the form of a cryptocurrency, and you'll quite likely have to hide your hardware wallet because more and more officials know what that is when you're crossing borders. So you have to be more adept at hiding that. Just like you're going to have more and more wealth maybe in gold, because with wealth taxes you're going to be expected to report everything, and it's going to be harder and harder not to do that. If you're in a first world country like the United States, it's going to be pretty obvious where your wealth is. If you use your credit card or an ATM card or a checking account to buy a lot of assets, they'll just figure out where your assets are even if you lie about it. They may not figure out right away. It may take them some time, but it's going to be pretty hard to protect your wealth if you're in the U.S. the way everything's online now, and they can see what you bought even if you lie about it. And again, I'm not giving legal advice or accounting advice. I'm just telling you, things that used to work in the past won't be as easy. Maybe they'll still work, but they won't be as effective as they used to be. To make things more effective, you quite literally might have to have certain amounts of your wealth in the form of a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum and or a gold coin hidden right on your person. You're quite literally going to have your capital in the form of your brain, where you pick up sticks, go to another country, get a residency, and you start working online from that country. Like, for example, you get a residency in Central America and you work online. It could be something as easy as teaching English online. You can still use your old bank accounts in the U.S., but a few of my friends who do this, they've set up local accounts, especially if their employer is not a U.S.-based employer. They just have their offshore-based employer, usually in Asia, just send them money to their local account. And then they either spend all the money or they take all the money out at the end of the month and convert it into other forms of wealth, or they convert it into another nominee account that's not in their name because for whatever reason they don't want to keep a lot of money in their local account there. Anyhow, it's getting easier and easier to do these things as far as working online. It's getting easier and easier to buy the hardware, like a laptop, computer, camera. These things are getting cheaper and cheaper. So what I foresee happening is kind of like in the 70s, even now with all these YouTube influencers, all these influencers who fly all over the world and make videos about where they go, and they get AdSense revenue from it, and that's what they do. My prediction is a lot of that AdSense revenue is going to fade away and disappear. And if you're a U.S. citizen, you're getting AdSense from Amazon, it's going to be highly visible, highly taxed, not now, but in the future. And if you ever get doxxed, that will be closed to you. So you have to figure out a way to earn a living from multiple customers from your own business, or for multiple customers in the sense that you work for 2 or 3 different online schools teaching English. This is just one example. Or you have multiple customers from your consulting and business. Another thing about consulting I'll just bring up, a lot of people have experience in their own fields of interest or in their own hobbies. That's kind of what I see happening, where people are going to use that specialized knowledge and sell special reports or ebooks and or consulting services on how to, get into this XYZ hobby. You see it all the time on YouTube. One of the biggest, well, not the biggest, one of the smaller niches is all these YouTubers living in foreign countries and then blogging about it through YouTube. And then they set up their accounts to get AdSense, and they also to get money from their reports and ebooks and private consultations on how they did it all. You see men and women from all Western countries doing this right now. I mean, from South Africa to the United Kingdom to Australia, New Zealand, to people from France, from Italy. It's just very, very common now. And I think partly you're seeing the early starts of that because more and more Western nations that have become bankrupt, they're going to have all these silly taxes like wealth taxes, increasing income tax, and special new taxes they create to try to get blood from a turnip. And it's not going to work. The wealth taxes haven't worked in Europe. France has come out, talked about the damage that was caused in their country. But they're going to still try it. Just as a matter of fact, I don't know if I already mentioned it, but South Africa has just come out and said anyone who has over $250,000 will be, this is being proposed, I don't think it's passed yet, but anyone who has a net worth over $250,000 will be taxed at a special rate. And it may just be for 1 year. But that's what they're saying. They'll if they introduce this and it gets introduced and it's law, they're probably going to raise the actual amount, and they're probably going to keep it on every year, and more people will just leave the country. Already now, South Africans they've been fleeing for decades, but now it's going to be even more. Basically, what we're seeing South Africa do is following the footsteps of like Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Argentina, and you could even say Lebanon. Lebanon's been on my mind lately because of some personal family ties and watching the country go from 2019 to 2021 where the currencies collapsed not 80%, 90%. Formerly pretty well off middle class people are now ruined. The ones who aren't ruined were the ones who left when they still could. The ones who left, maybe they didn't have any wealth, but they had a US or Canadian based passport from their family connections. They just left to those countries. Even if it was just to get a tourist visa, they just left and are staying in the United Kingdom or US and starting up their laptop business. I call them laptop businesses. They just got out. This last week, it's gotten to the point where you can't even buy food at grocery stores because the people who want to buy inventory, they don't have access to their dollar accounts. They're not getting any revenue, so they can't buy food to restock their shelves. It's just really, really awful. It's really bad. So what I see happening is more and more young people, especially younger people, and many people in my age group starting to design a strategy where they'll keep their US-based bank accounts and their PayPal accounts to get revenue that way, but they're starting to open accounts in other countries. They're starting to get residency in other countries, and they're starting to do kind of what I call the kind of the circle. They travel around to various countries where they can or they may do business, where they can meet new people and start up new businesses and or start up bank accounts. They're traveling around looking for clients, but they kind of do a circle. They just go to their favorite places, a couple months in Thailand if maybe they enjoy the nightlife, a couple of months in their home country if they like certain activities like hiking and bike riding, things like that. Those are things I like to do, and they can be a lot safer and a lot more pleasant in the United States or in Canada or in Southern Europe even compared to parts of Latin America. It's just not part of the culture to go hiking a lot and or bicycling. No, that's different in Chile. Chile is quite a bit different. So you could just do the loop where you maybe have a residency in Central America. You go to Lima and then you get on the circuit and you kind of head out towards Brazil and Paraguay. These are long distances if you do them by bus. So part of those journeys you'd be wise to do them by plane. But anyways, you get what I'm saying. And as I travel and research and see different places where they might fit in, for example, you might make $600 teaching English in a school in large parts of Latin America, but then if you go to Brazil, you make $1,200. But the cost of living in Brazil can be quite a bit higher. But like in anything in life, there's some workarounds on that. So, I'm not really necessarily recommending teaching English in Latin America because the wages are a little lower compared to Asia. I just give that as one example. A lot of times, until you actually go visit a country like Brazil or Mexico or Peru, you can't get a good idea what you might end up liking and doing there till you actually go there. A lot of the videos that YouTubers flip quite a few of them are pretty misleading. So until you actually go there and see if you feel comfortable living and working there, or even getting a job there, until you feel comfortable like you can start a business there, you have to kind of hit that trail, that gringo trail, and travel around, see where you like and where you might fit in. That's why I say you might actually enjoy earning your income online and then spending a few months in Southeast Asia, maybe a few months in Europe if you get kind of tired of the Asian culture, and then heading to Latin America if you want something a little different. I tend to focus on Latin America because that's where I am. In the past, I've been to the Philippines, and I do like it there. But even in the Philippines, things are changing drastically. And with the way the world's going, it might be more and more difficult to get cheap air flights, and it might get more and more difficult to travel based on the restrictions that's being placed because of COVID. I personally believe COVID will be over soon, but I do believe the restrictions will still be in place. And so some perpetual tourists and people like that will have to kind of concentrate on a region, like live in a region that they can travel overland on, because traveling by airplane is getting to be more and more difficult. It's not just your passport. It's not just the COVID passport. It's a lot of other things that people don't see coming that I see coming, where it's just not going to be easy to travel on airplanes anymore, and it's going to be quite expensive. And it's going to be so unpredictable what you can do that a lot of people are giving up. I've watched quite a few YouTubers basically say they're not traveling until all COVID is gone, because they don't want to spend $2,000 or $1,500 just to fly into Cambodia or Thailand, sit in a hotel for a week or two, and then not know if they can fly out in case they put restrictions on again. And they don't want to hear the story where they had to stay quarantined in a hotel for 2 weeks, and then a week later they change the rules and it's only a week, and that's a lot less now. And it's just the same thing with this travel insurance I keep yakking about. Costa Rica just lowered their COVID insurance from $100 a month to it's like $75 for 3 months. But a lot of people are they're not going to want to keep paying. They're not going to want to pay these fees. You're going to have to pay $50 to $100 to take a COVID test. You're going to have to get the injection. Then you're going to have proof of all this. Then on top of that, governments can change their mind anytime they want, and you could be stuck in a country. My friend he's pretty excited about Costa Rica. I mean, I'm not, but it's coming down like the travel insurance. But then there's places like Ecuador. Like once you become a resident in Ecuador, you have to pay that 17% healthcare tax. I see more and more countries are going to start hitting expats with the healthcare tax because their healthcare systems are underfunded or bankrupt. That's why I see more and more people. They'll only have residencies in certain countries. They won't want to live too long in other countries because you're going to start getting hit with special taxes like these healthcare taxes or these travel tax, like for the COVID tax. I call it the COVID tax. Like in both Thailand and Costa Rica, you have to have healthcare insurance for as long as you're there, even if you're just a tourist, just on the off chance you might get COVID. I think they're going to extend that to include everything because so many people go to Thailand, get sick in Thailand, and then stiff the hospitals there. And from what I've read, the same thing happens in Costa Rica. The same thing happened in Ecuador because all these retirees are going there. They're living their last years there. They're sticking the hospitals with thousands and thousands of dollars worth of bills, and then they pass away or they can't pay it. So that's causing some strain and stress on the population, seeing that, and then so they want to introduce a special tax to hit just them, just foreigners. In Ecuador, it happens to be 17%. In Costa Rica, I'm not sure what it is, but I do know that once you become resident in Costa Rica, you have to pay the healthcare tax. So as these fees and taxes go up, and then when COVID ends, and then they just keep these fees on just to get more revenue from tourists coming in, that's just going to change how tourism is done. So I think that's going to change the airline industry in ways I can't really understand. But I think it's going to get more difficult to travel all over the world cheaply until some of these policies get more worked out or better understood. So my strategy going forward is probably going to be live in one region, like say Latin America, travel around or between it as things get easier to travel. I'll start doing that. And then if it actually opens up, so it's easy and cheap to travel to Asia, I may go to Asia just because, but I'm not betting on that. We'll see what happens, but I'm just mentally preparing myself that it won't be easy to travel to all your favorite destinations anymore. You're going to have to decide what region you're going to live in. You're going to have to decide which residency you get because they're going to make it harder and harder to get a residency. And then you're going to have to decide which fees and taxes you're going to have to put up with if you live in those areas. Where I live in Central America, it has some of the lowest income taxes, some of the lowest corporate taxes, and all those taxes are very easily gotten around with the use of an accountant. And there's no special healthcare tax. There's no special COVID tax. And the borders where I live are so porous, even if you didn't have a passport or a travel ID, you can travel to the neighboring country. It's quite easy to go to Mexico. It's quite easy to go to Honduras and El Salvador. And with your local ID or even without it, I won't claim it's easy to go to Belize. That's not really on my travel list, but a person, if they really wanted to go there, could go there. So anyways, I'm just making that observation. It's just getting to the point now where I see these Western governments are just going to make taxes higher and higher. And I've done a lot of research in the States. Some of these local governments, they know full well they're bankrupt and they can't get any revenue, so they're starting to send people tax bills even though they knowingly know they don't really owe these monies. And some of the stuff is starting to come out. It's being screenshotted in emails and in texts that people receive from employees of these so-called these state and county governments. So this is coming out. This is not going to be a secret, but I don't know what's going to happen. But I think the next thing is going to happen if wealth taxes aren't introduced, they're going to just start inflating the currencies more. So that's just going to push more and more people into commodities and cryptocurrencies. It's also going to push more people outside the U.S. I say that because a lot of the people I know, one of the biggest reasons they travel is they want a simpler lifestyle and they want more of a low-cost lifestyle. And there's even a small subsect of people I know, they're pushed out of the U.S. or Canada or Europe because their income is so low they can't afford to live there in a comfortable lifestyle. So that's why they leave. I just see this happening more and more. I personally don't want to live in one country year-round in the same place, so I'm more attracted to the perpetual tourist lifestyle, or what they call the PT lifestyle. I'm going to be looking to implement it more, because I see there's going to come a time where you're going to have more than one option open. You're going to want to have different ways of earning income, and you're going to want to have more options for study even, and just a lot of different things. And if you're stuck in the United States, a lot of these options are going to be less and less and less. And in fact, if they actually do put the wealth tax on, a lot of small businesses are going to leave the U.S. The big businesses get the subsidies and handouts from the government, so they'll stay. But a lot of these small businesses, they're going to leave. This is really going to I think this could get really bad, and getting a job that pays enough to pay your bills in the U.S. is going to it's going to be more and more difficult. In fact, when people talk about the Great Reset, that's what I think people should really be thinking about. It's just going to be tougher and tougher in these first world countries to survive and prosper. If you stay in those countries, you're going to have to go to an adjacent country. In Europe, you're going to have to go to Africa or Asia. In the United States, you're going to have to consider going to Latin America. I say that because these are all countries. You're going to have to go to a country that has a land border that you can actually get across, because more and more countries are going to restrict your actual airport travel. That's going to be the choke point. The choke point is going to be they're going to shut off your bank account. And the other choke point is going to be they're going to keep you from traveling on an airplane. In fact, when I saw the £5,000 fine for people who want to leave the United Kingdom, that's just shocking. And then there's a £200 fine if you don't fill out the paperwork right. And without paying the £5,000 fine, you have to have a travel reason. I could see them not loosening up those restrictions, actually increasing those restrictions even when COVID's done, just to keep people in. But we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. Anyways, I'm going to upload this video. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you.